Hey there, Jack Miller here. Let me ask you something real quick. When was the last time you went grocery shopping and didn't feel slightly offended at the checkout screen? Or booked a flight and thought, why does this cost more than my first car? Or maybe you ordered your usual takeout, and the total made you double-check the receipt like it committed a crime. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Prices aren't just going up, they're accelerating. And while that's happening, most people's money is sitting still, not growing, not compounding, not fighting back, just existing. And every single day it sits there, it quietly loses strength, like leaving ice in the sun and hoping it stays frozen. That silent force eating away at your future. Inflation. And in 2026, it's not just background noise anymore. It's a serious financial threat if you don't understand how it works. But here's what makes 2026 different. This isn't just normal inflation. We're dealing with higher interest rates, higher government debt, higher consumer debt, and global instability that hasn't fully settled. That combination is dangerous. Because when inflation stays elevated for multiple years, something happens. People get tired. They stop noticing. They normalize it. They accept smaller portions, higher prices, lower purchasing power. And that's when inflation does the most damage, when people stop fighting it. Let me explain something most people never connect. When inflation rises, central banks raise interest rates. When rates rise, borrowing becomes expensive. When borrowing becomes expensive, businesses slow down. Hiring slows down. Growth slows down. But prices don't immediately fall, so you get squeezed from both sides. Expenses up. Opportunity down. That's the 2026 risk. Now think about your personal life. Rent rising, insurance rising, groceries rising, subscriptions rising, travel rising. But your salary? Maybe a small raise, maybe nothing. That gap between income and expenses? That's the real inflation tax. And it compounds. Let's run a scenario. Imagine you earn $50,000 per year. Inflation averages 4%. If your salary doesn't increase at least 4% annually, you're effectively taking a pay cut every year. Even if your paycheck number looks the same, your lifestyle shrinks quietly. This is why so many people feel like they're working harder but getting ahead slower. They're not crazy. The math is just against them. Today, we're diving deep into why inflation in 2026 is uniquely dangerous, how it quietly destroys your purchasing power, and most importantly, how you can position yourself ahead of it. Because here's the truth most people avoid. If your money isn't growing, it's shrinking. Let's break it down. Quick crash course. Inflation simply means prices rise over time. That's it. But the simplicity is what makes it sneaky. It doesn't feel dramatic. It feels gradual. Your coffee goes from $4 to $4.50. Gas creeps up. Rent renewals come in a little higher. Your streaming services quietly bump the monthly fee. And you adjust. You always adjust. But here's what most people miss. Inflation isn't about prices rising. It's about your money buying less. Same dollar. Less power. Think of inflation like slow corrosion. It doesn't smash your savings in one night. It slowly erodes them. If inflation averages 4% per year, your money loses 4% of its purchasing power annually. Every single year. Now here's the part that should make you pause. Most savings accounts still pay somewhere between 0.5 and 2%. So even if your bank says you're earning interest, you're actually losing ground. Quietly. Consistently. And because it's slow, people ignore it. But slow damage is still damage. Here's something fascinating. When inflation hits fast, people react. When it drags on slowly, people adapt. They downgrade brands. They cut experiences. They delay investments. They keep more cash because it feels safe. But cash during inflation is not safe. It feels safe. But it's melting. Fear makes people freeze. And freezing financially in an inflationary environment is expensive. Some people panic and speculate. They chase crypto spikes, meme stocks, hot trends, trying to outrun inflation overnight. That's not strategy. That's gambling. The goal isn't to get rich fast. The goal is to stay ahead consistently. Small advantages, over long periods, that's how you win. The silent illusion, I'm fine. Here's another psychological trap. Most people measure financial health by their bank balance. If I still have 10,000 in my account, I'm fine. But that's nominal thinking. Real thinking asks, what does that 10,000 buy today, compared to 5 years ago? If 5 years ago it covered 6 months of expenses, and today it covers 4, you didn't lose money, but you lost resilience. And resilience is everything in uncertain cycles. People don't feel inflation immediately. They feel it later, when something breaks. The car repair costs more. The medical bill is higher. The insurance deductible jumped. And suddenly, the safe cushion feels thinner. That's the illusion. Inflation doesn't create panic. It creates slow vulnerability. Let's make this visual in 2020. $100 buys you a solid pair of sneakers. In 2026, that same pair cost $120. That's inflation. But if your $100 just sat in a drawer, you didn't lose the $100, but you lost what it could buy. You feel safe because the number hasn't changed, but the value has. Now scale that up. 5,000 sitting idle, 10,000 sitting idle, 50,000 sitting idle. That's thousands of dollars in lost future lifestyle. Fewer vacations. Smaller down payment, later retirement. Inflation doesn't steal from your bank account. It steals from your options. And options are freedom. 2 neighbors, let me tell you about 2 neighbors. Same age, same income, same city. Daniel kept everything in cash. He liked certainty. He didn't trust markets. Emma invested steadily. Broad index funds. Some real estate exposure. A portion in fixed income. 5 years pass. Inflation averages around 4%. Daniel's savings technically stayed the same. Emma's portfolio fluctuated. Up some years, down others, but averaged higher growth over time. Result: Daniel feels stable. Emma feels stronger. Because Emma's purchasing power grew, Daniel's shrank quietly. The scary part? Daniel doesn't realize it yet. That's how inflation works. Long-term reality check. Fixed math. Let's zoom out properly. If inflation averages 4% for 20 years, prices don't just go up. They increase by about 119%. That means something that costs $50,000 today would cost roughly $109,500 in 20 years. Not double, more than double. Now flip it. If your investments grow at 8% annually for 20 years, your money doesn't double. It grows by about 366%. 10,000 becomes roughly 46,000. That gap, between 4% erosion and 8% growth, is not small. It's life-altering. That difference determines retire at 60 or 68, own your home, or rent longer, work because you want to, or because you have to. 10-year scenario. Real consequences. Let's compress it. You save $10,000 today. Inflation averages 4% for 10 years. That money has the purchasing power of about $6,750 in today's dollars. That's a used car gone. That's a year of rent in many cities. That's a serious emergency fund reduction. Now imagine you earned 8% annually instead. After 10 years, roughly $21,600. Same starting point. Completely different future. That's not luck. That's positioning.
What if inflation spikes to 6 to 8%? Now let's stress test this. What if inflation isn't 4%? What if it's 6% or 8%? At 8% inflation, prices double in about 9 years. 9. That means your cost of living could double before your kids finish elementary school. Now combine that with higher interest rates. Mortgage rates in the United States peaked above 18% in 1981.
18%. That happened. It wasn't ancient history. It was during the Federal Reserve tightening cycle under Paul Volcker to break runaway inflation. If inflation forces central banks to tighten aggressively again, Borrowing gets expensive fast. Refinancing becomes painful. New home buyers get squeezed. Businesses delay expansion. And households feel pressure from every direction. Expenses up. Debt more expensive. Growth slowing. That's a dangerous mix.
Generational mindset shift. Older generations remember the 1970s and early 1980s. They remember gas lines. They remember double-digit inflation. They remember mortgage rates in the teens. Younger generations grew up during decades of falling interest rates, cheap money, stable prices, low mortgage costs.
From the early 1980s until around 2020, interest rates generally trended downward. That shaped behavior. People got used to easy credit, low borrowing costs, rising asset prices. So psychologically, many under 35 underestimate prolonged inflation risk because they've never lived through a sustained inflationary squeeze. But history shows inflation cycles can last longer than people expect, and markets reward those who prepare early, not those who react late.
The salary illusion. Let's talk about something subtle, the raise illusion. You earn $50,000 per year. Your employer gives you a 2% raise. You feel good. You're now making $51,000. But inflation is 4%. In real terms, you just took a 2% pay cut. Now extend that for 5 years. If inflation averages 4% and your salary grows at 2% annually,
your purchasing power declines roughly 10% over that period. You're working harder, earning more nominally, but affording less. That's why people say, I'm making more than ever, but it feels tighter. They're not imagining it. The math explains it.
Inflation changes behavior. Here's the deeper layer. Inflation doesn't just change prices, it changes people. Couples argue more about money. Risk tolerance shifts. Some people become overly conservative. Others become reckless trying to catch up. People delay having kids. They postpone buying homes.
They stay in jobs they dislike because stability feels safer. Inflation changes timelines. It compresses dreams. And when that pressure lasts long enough, it reshapes life decisions. That's not just economics. That's psychology.
What to do? Without repeating the obvious, you don't need extreme strategies. You need alignment, cash for emergencies, investments for growth, assets that historically outpace inflation, income growth as a priority, skill expansion, negotiation, strategic career moves, because the most powerful inflation hedge is rising earning capacity.
Let's make this concrete. Meet the Johnsons, a family of 4 living in a mid-sized U.S. city. Annual household income, $90,000 monthly expenses, $5,500, rent, groceries, utilities, insurance, transportation, subscriptions, and a small buffer for discretionary spending. Savings, $20,000 in a checking and savings account. Year 1, inflation hits 4%. Groceries cost $600 more per month. Gas rises $80. Rent increases by $200. The Johnsons feel the pinch but adjust slightly. Skip a few takeout meals. Postpone new furniture. Year 2, inflation continues at 4%. Their nominal income rises 3% to $92,700. They celebrate the raise, but real purchasing power? It's actually lower than 2 years ago. Their $5,500 monthly budget now buys what $5,000 did 2 years prior. Cumulative effect over 5 years. Inflation, 4% per year. Roughly 22% total price increase. Salary growth, 3% per year. Roughly 16% total nominal increase. Net effect, the Johnsons' real purchasing power drops around 6% over 5 years. Here's the kicker. They feel like they're getting ahead. They see the bigger paycheck, but the reality? They can afford less. Vacations are shorter. Dining out is reduced. Retirement contributions are smaller than planned. Now let's add a proactive approach. What could they do differently? Invest consistently. $500 per month in a diversified mix of index funds, dividend stocks, and some bonds.
Over 5 years, at an average 7% annual return, those contributions grow to roughly $35,000. That offsets the inflation erosion and even builds net wealth. Refinance or fix mortgage rates. Their 30-year mortgage adjusts from 5% to a potential 6.5% over 5 years. By refinancing wisely and locking rates when possible, they save $200 to $300 per month, freeing money to invest.
Expand income. One parent takes a certification course, boosting their earning potential by $7,000 annually after 3 years. That increase compounds faster than inflation. The lesson: small intentional moves, investing, skill upgrades, refinancing, expense awareness, can turn a seemingly small cumulative loss into a net gain in real purchasing power. Notice the psychological impact too. Year 1, mild annoyance. Year 2 to 3, stress about rising costs. Year 4, lifestyle compromises start to affect family decisions, delayed vacations, postponed major purchases. Year 5, if no action is taken, the family feels trapped financially. But with strategic steps, the Johnsons not only keep pace with inflation, they actually gain options, increase financial resilience, and avoid silent erosion of lifestyle. Strong final section. Let's slow this down. Inflation is not dramatic. It doesn't explode. It doesn't send alerts. It whispers. A little more here, a little more there. If you ignore it for 5 years, you feel tighter. 10 years, you feel constrained. 15 years, you feel behind. Not because you were reckless, but because you were passive. This isn't about fear. It's about responsibility. You cannot control global policy, interest rate decisions, or geopolitical shocks, but you can control how you position yourself financially. You can choose whether your resources stagnate or multiply, whether your skills expand or plateau, whether inflation quietly erodes your lifestyle, or growth compounds your options. In 2026, the biggest financial risk isn't market volatility, it's inertia. Doing nothing feels safe, but it's quietly expensive, and the cost compounds over time.
Micro steps for control. Here's a practical framework to act on immediately. 1. Assess your real financial position. Calculate how many months your current cash actually covers at today's prices. Separate emergency liquidity from investable funds.
2. Automate growth. Consistently allocate a fixed portion of income to investments each month. Use low-cost index funds, ETFs, or diversified portfolios. 3. Protect purchasing power. Consider inflation-linked securities like TIPS. Explore short-term bonds, fixed income, or selective commodities. 4. Grow earning capacity. Upgrade skills, certifications, or expertise that directly increase income potential. Look for side income streams aligned with current abilities. 5. Behavioral adjustments. Track personal inflation, groceries, rent, utilities, subscriptions. Avoid lifestyle creep. Redirect raises into growth or debt reduction. Set measurable micro goals: monthly savings, quarterly review, annual investment increase. Living through inflation. Human impact. Inflation is as much psychological as it is financial. It changes decisions silently. Couples may argue more about money. Risk tolerance shifts, either overly cautious or overly aggressive. Life events are postponed. Children, home purchases, career moves. The subtle mental effects accumulate over years. They're often invisible until you notice. Dreams delayed, opportunities foregone, lifestyle choices narrowed. Awareness alone is not enough. Intentional, consistent action combats both financial and psychological erosion. Practical strategies. Layered approach. Think in 5 actionable layers. Cash layer. Secure emergency fund with enough liquidity for unexpected expenses. Growth layer. Investments historically outperforming inflation. Income layer. Focus on increasing earning power continuously. Protection layer. Tips, bonds, insurance to safeguard against unexpected shocks. Behavioral layer. Prevent impulsive decisions, track expenses, maintain long-term discipline. When all layers align, you're not merely surviving inflation, you're leveraging it to build resilience and opportunity. The cost of inaction. Time passes inevitably. Small decisions compound silently. Ignoring inflation today may feel harmless. You still see the same dollar amount in your account. You feel like progress is happening. But in reality, your purchasing power decreases. Opportunities for growth shrink. Financial resilience erodes before you even notice. Intentional action flips the equation. Every small investment increase, every skill upgrade, every strategic allocation. All of it compounds in your favor. The future will reward those who act, not those who wait. Your control is not in predicting inflation or timing markets. It's in consistent allocation, strategic protection, growth of skills and income, mindful, deliberate financial choices. Your money, your knowledge, and your decisions are leverage. Use them wisely. Doing nothing feels safe, but it's quietly costly. And the cost? It compounds. The choice is yours. Will inflation silently shrink your options, or will your actions expand them? Will you be passive, or will you position yourself to thrive? Stay informed. Stay disciplined. Stay intentional. Stay positioned. Because in 2026, the greatest financial threat is inaction, and compounding the right steps is your strongest defense. If this opened your eyes, subscribe. With me, Jack Miller, we'll keep breaking down financial strategies, building knowledge, and moving from $100 to $1 million together. More practical, actionable videos are coming your way. Don't miss them.